Fairly uncharacteristically for my channel, at least taking my whole run into consideration, I avoided most meaningful discussion of Kingdom Hearts' story during the marathon, but found myself with a lot of things to say that belong to no video. I like my stuff cropped. This is my excuse to talk about the story and its construction. Kingdom Hearts is the last series I want to spoil the events of, and it's part of the fun experiencing those things yourself. So while this isn't a comprehensive plot deep dive, you should click off now if you have any intention of playing through Kingdom Hearts. You can also leave if you're looking for highly edited comedy content. This isn't a fun time this time. Though you're welcome to mute this vid and play it at 0.25 speed for my analytics. Still here, huh? To be honest, I'm a lot more interested in the way the story is viewed as a whole, the optics of Kingdom Hearts as a multimedia experience, and the future of the series than I am discussing the actual events of the games, outside a few notable examples. You've heard it, I've heard it, Kingdom Hearts is stupid. Kingdom Hearts is dumb, and that's a good thing. The former is annoying to sit through endlessly because it's dismissive, the latter is annoying to sit through because it's defensive, like the speaker needs to preempt the audience with a taste buffer, show their taste bona fides, and hey, man, it's fine to like stuff, but these sentiments exist for a reason. Kingdom Hearts has a plot, yes, but it delivers its story in ways that are totally atypical of traditional storytelling. It's inconsistent in its delivery, and its basis, its conception, is tinged by corporate interest. And I acknowledge that longtime KH fans know more than I do, but I think these optics deserve some discussion. So let's talk optics. I implied it in previous episodes, so I'll be clear now. Kingdom Hearts is bewildering from the outside perspective, but potentially just as enticing. The games generally have razor-sharp mechanics, incredible polish, beautiful aesthetic elements, it mixes Disney, which we all grew up with, and Final Fantasy, which everyone's heard of, though only some of us have played the good ones. The concept might be fertile ground for video games, but is not fertile ground to grow a story. No matter how good, the games were spread thin over many consoles, except the mainline games that remained on home console. Major plot points were hidden away in these games that any other franchise would call spin-offs, but Kingdom Hearts doesn't allow its spin-offs to be that. One would have to own a PlayStation 2, a PSP, a Game Boy Advance, a Nintendo DS, a 3DS, a decent smartphone to experience the entire collection as it existed until the PS4 collection. And yes, you can read summaries, watch YouTube breakdowns, that's fine, but it's unfair to some. There are people who really need the in-person cinema experience to enjoy movies. I think that's conceivable on the gaming front too, and I personally know a fan that's only played 1 and 2 for lack of other consoles. I think the series was handled well in the respect that everyone got something, but from the confusing titling, at least to Joe Q Public, the general inaccessibility, at least to actually experience all the games for oneself, Kingdom Hearts drops the ball. It's certainly not said of Kingdom Hearts that the story is really well understood by everyone. It's certainly not said of Kingdom Hearts that its games never miss. And the result of this disparate existence is a franchise with core fans and a million orbiters. Every fan comes to KH3, the current main game, from a different perspective and a different level of expertise. One thing that kind of bugged me a few years back was certain reviewers making mention of reviewing KH3 without prior experience in the series and the resulting backlash from the fans. Because of all the series in the world, Kingdom Hearts needs both perspectives represented. People need to know if it's worth it to go all in on the series or play the new game. And there are definitely more never playeds than played-alls, you know? It's not an invalid perspective. The fear was understandable, but a bit of a knee-jerk. Like XYZ reviewers gonna ruin my favorite game's reputation with their video, which just isn't true. Outside of insular YouTube gaming communities, most game reviews don't have the power to sink a corporation or their marketing, not to mention, human beings aren't so unintelligent or devoid of autonomy as to become total sycophants over a YouTube game reviewer, at least not in a majority. And it should be pretty easy for any thinking person to ignore the things they don't understand in a Kingdom Hearts game and blame themselves for not playing them all, you know? I just have a hard time uncharitably imagining all media experiencers as awful bleeding sheep. And it's why I say Kingdom Hearts dropped the ball. If that kind of blow-up was the result of a scattered series and uninformed people, that's on you, Square. I have no one to blame but myself if my videos don't convey what I mean them to, you know? Though admittedly, players could be more conscientious of development issues and publisher stupidity as well. The biggest issue with the story, though, to loop back to the fertile ground bit, is that Kingdom Hearts shouldn't be able to exist at all. It's a joint venture in video game making between two established IPs, one of which being so strict as to fire employees for breaking character at their theme parks. It's a wonder Kingdom Hearts has run as long as it has, that it was never dropped by Square or Disney. Unbelievably lucky that it was never retired as a concept, so the story's been allowed to continue. Think about it. There's this series with a million crazy plot points, spread over a bunch of consoles, all building to the next step in the story, and it's perched on the flimsiest foundation, two companies maintaining an agreement. The head dev, presumably the only one who can manage the story anymore, being able to work on the games. If something ever happened with the Disney agreement, if Nomura ever stopped being able to contribute, Kingdom Hearts could simply never return. And sure, it could live on in one form or another conceivably, but I think it'd suffer for it. It is absolutely not a solid base to form a story. I certainly wouldn't write a story with that as the base for fear of losing my work if my contributor pulled out. And yet Kingdom Hearts' story is one of its most discussed elements. So let's talk story. I reiterate, I don't think the actual plot points and story events matter so much. It's why I'm comfortable not doing theory content or talking plot holes, etc. You could tell me anything happened in any game, with even the flimsiest justification, and I'd say, okay, I believe you. It's kinda necessary to enjoy the series because the long-form plot is the thread connecting all entries, transcending even gameplay systems that tend to shift in significant ways from game to game. And if you find the story annoying or objectionable, you're gonna have a bad time. The way I see it, a few different people are experiencing Kingdom Hearts. There's Jordan, who's looking from the outside, who sees all the crazy stuff out of context, the memes, the Mickey Mouse, choking Mickey Mouse, and they're walking away calling it stupid, never touching it. They are the Dark Hearts, and willing to open themselves to vulnerability, but we don't hate them, and we don't pity them. That's rude. We acknowledge the pain they're going through, and wish them well. There's Taylor, who may or may not be interested in the series, but went to a few literature or writing classes, studied the English canon in post-secondary, and failing that, listened to a lot of YouTube critic men, and is not reacting well to Kingdom Hearts' story. They're sneering at what is effectively corporate fanfiction. They believe that no art could possibly come from this. They might enjoy the gameplay, thinking the rest of the game is kinda dumb, but whatever. Then there's Francis, who doesn't care what you say about fanfiction. Whoa! Well, everyone should write what they want, long as they're writing, okay? Just wants some good games, and the story happens to be positive and endearing. They're not totally cynical, and they've either played the core games and read the rest, or done the run. They like that the series celebrates video games, they like Sora and cheering him on, and maybe even the frequent innovation couched in familiarity. And those are loose definitions, sure. Like I said, so many people come to this series in different ways because of its shard-like existence, but overall, yeah, the only groups I effectively left out are the speedrunner diehards and the theorists, because frankly, half of them don't want you in. I tend to fall between Taylor and Francis, or more accurately, I was Taylor about 3 years ago, and I've transformed quite a bit in that time. I know that a video game's story doesn't need to slot into the English literary canon, that just because it's silly doesn't mean it can't be fun, that the realities of game dev workflow and changing writers make writing a withering afterthought in many games. I know that translating a game is imperfect and sometimes practically impossible. And above those, I know that a game's story need only serve the game it's designed for, and that while Kingdom Hearts may be easy to class as, yes, a kind of corporate fanfiction, the original elements emerging from that lineage are worth some respect. The game isn't pure fanfiction. Final Fantasy characters don't merely interact with Disney characters. There's a story spoken between those lines. I think people tend to get caught up in the obvious stuff, even myself at times, with things like Xehanort not getting a good amount of main series screen time build-up, with Nomura apparently not knowing what kind of villain he was supposed to be. That kind of thing is crazy to me. It's why I think it's important not to expect too much from the game's writing. That is, it's an action game. It only needs a story that works within the action game context. And it kind of does. It gets close. It features a lot of interesting twists, perfect for drama, for motivating the player to keep moving to the next bad guy, to get to the next cool scene. Unfortunately, much of the cutscene content in all three mainline games is either Disney movie derivative early on, and thus not surprising, like good drama often is or should be, or it's fluff, which 2 and 3 are loaded with. I mean, I said it in another video, but I was skipping cutscenes in 2, with how often they interrupted the game to tell me nothing, just show off more Disney assets being themselves. Unfortunately, most of the interesting plot points and scenes are loaded at the front and back end of any particular game. Very often, cutscenes in more budget handheld titles, and even in mainline ones, are delivered with a bunch of text and characters standing around, literally doing nothing, and I think you could cut a pile of them if it funded a few good action scenes. It's taking cues from its JRPG influence, that being Final Fantasy, right? But I just don't know what they were thinking. It's a common complaint, to be sure, but there really isn't a great excuse for endless expositing, especially in an action game, especially in a series loaded with nouns, that is, series-specific power words like hearts and darkness that can be annoying to listen to or hard to sit through when most of it amounts to pseudo-philosophical meandering in cutscenes, the kind of stuff writing students throw into their work and get told to cut. It's rare that characters of consequence speak plainly. In short, the story and how it's delivered is, at times, at odds with the genre, though not universally, and to be fair, it's not only an action series, it's just that it sells that aspect of itself so hard, with the varied set pieces, novel challenges, and using combat to solve problems, the whole mechanical iceberg, etc. The other major story complaint, the one I heard the most before playing the games, is that phrase we all love: Kingdom Hearts is too complicated, Kingdom Hearts is convoluted, and 100 other variations. Damn, imagine being literally 50-50, right and wrong. I am all the time. Now, the common response is, it's not that complicated if you just look at a summary or pay close attention. But the complaint of convolution doesn't exist because the events are necessarily too hard to follow, but that many elements enter the plot seemingly without reason, without apparent planning, without allowing the player to reasonably predict the plot or come to any holistic understanding of the greater story until the next big reveal. And I'd agree that there were at least 3 times I was caught totally off guard, and more or less couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's where a lot of negativity concentrates in the discourse, but if you saw my 3rd video, you know I had fun regardless of the crazy stuff. I love it because I've detached from expectation, and to be fair to the naysayers, Johnny Academic or whatever, things like time travel, other dimensions, darkness within darkness, magical abilities being granted to characters that are effectively without precedent, if these things were introduced in a budding writer's work, they'd be called hackneyed, lazy, extraneous, outside the scope of the work, cliche, they'd be told to go back to the drawing board by any editor. Very rarely are these things smiled upon. It's why I preempted this by twice saying the story doesn't need to be a work fit for the English literary canon. It just doesn't. It's an unfair expectation. Consume your Wuthering Heights. Elsewhere, thanks? And even with that justification, right, the story isn't perfect. Scenes like Goofy dying haunt me, not because they're hilarious, but because he comes back 2 seconds later totally fine, because no one checked his pulse, I guess. Or are Donald and Goofy heartless automatons created by Mickey? And they do that if it served the story. So, Kingdom Hearts is. Vis-a-vis, ergo. I think I've evoked some of the more troubled story bits, but KH3 in particular disappointed a lot of fans. And I guess we're gonna have to blame the total restructuring of the game that happened before release. Still, if you're a fan of Ventus, playing vanilla waiting for any Aqua interactions, or a fan of Kairi waiting for her one chance to be an active player in the plot, and she just gets popped like a fucking grape. Man, the Disney worlds were on an upward relevance trend since 2, but in 3 they actively made an effort to make the presence of the organization on the worlds kind of sensical. They actually gave reasons to be there, except half the time it was stuff they absolutely should have known, so people called it forced. Then they just straight up reanimated movie segments with the gang there, or in Corona's and the Caribbean's case, had the movie play out without input from the gang in the background. Bizarrely, I mean, let's not defend it with the no meddling thing. Those chuckles have been meddling for years. So yeah, KH3 dropped the ball story-wise in many respects. All I wanted from it was the ending segment, beating up the org, having the characters come together, and again, Remind fixed a lot of the bad, but understandably not for everyone. I'm more baffled by the latest reveals, once again, hiding them at the tail end of weird spin-offs that aren't even action games, and with the finale of Remind, it's apparent that, once again, Kingdom Hearts is moving on. Something I don't begrudge, but the fans are looking more punished by the day. To be a Kingdom Hearts fan, you really do have to swim in the thing. You have to, no pun intended, let it go. Ultimately, I think it's fun, but it's like a sitcom, or a cult, and without the collection, absolutely suffering from inaccessibility. So thank God for that. It's the kind of series I'd love more people to come out to, but realistically, I feel like you either stumble upon it or get really, really pushed into it. But the game is a force for good. I'm not sure why the internet cups their hands around their collective misery for this series, but it's a KBash recommendation. Try it. I think you'll like it. Hey, it's KBash. Special thanks goes out to my $4 patrons, whose names are on the screen. The show's on its way somewhere good thanks to the community's generosity. And special thanks goes out to my extra generous patrons who are 1307, Andy Blarg, Azero, Basement Dweller, Beverage Crisp, Boha, Brandon, Brios, Cal, Caesar T, Chief, Cordant, Chris A, Cody Golden, Corgi the Lad, Couch MOBA, CW Glassworks, Kyle Lapreed, Daddy Dagoth, Dakota Storm Jones, Dara, David Castillo, Demon, Den Het, Don't Worry About It, Dylan Coffee, Annex, Exa, Frankenstitch, Glyph Seeker, Guard Corey, Gucci Plant, Hatsune Miku's Crack House, Harkaj, Heman Gamin Station, Huey, Ingenious Clown, Ice Kyle, Jason Lasky, Jaden, J-Daz, John Weber, Joke Frog, Justin Sherry, Keegan Too Cool, Keith Myers, Kelvin, Creighton, Crazy Dark Chocolate, Latrix, Laundry Mom, Lego Sid, Liam, Lon, Lucas Phoenix, Magical Madman, Marcules, Marmato, Maximilian Wolfgang Niver, Milky Moo Official, Miscellaneous, Mr. Dodongo, Miles Burris, Nito Torpedo, Old Burgle, Only LK, Pink Peacock, Quasar McDougal, Quillworth, Quinn, Reggie Rodriguez, Ricochet Frame, Sagitrash, Siren Smells Good, Salty Smasher, Sekai no Awarida, Seamus Nerd, Shod, Simp God, Special Children, Spooky Grimalkin, Sublime Cataclysm, Super Sandwich Guy, Tenken Zephyrborn, TFY Lex, The Big Bubby, The Salt Knight, They Call Me Gambit, Thrips Heartrop, Travis Edwards, Twiddle Chungus, V01156, Venom, Viewers Like You, Vic, Walter Taggart, Waposa, Weeb Trash, Well Shit, Yay Kundo, Zachary V, Zanaso, Zane the Impure, Zane the Pure, Zed Slayer Gamer. If you'd like to help support the show and make it even better, check out my Patreon. We've got all kinds of goals and lots of rewards in store. Stay tuned for more. KBash out.